Hey, good evening everybody. Shulam Aleichem, Daf Chesam at Beis today. By the two dots, Ein ba yediyah betchila, v'yesh ba yediyah besoif. No, excuse me. I apologize. I jumped a block. Getting ahead of myself. Daf Zayin at Beis. Where are we? We're Omar Mar. There we are. Omar Mar. So yesterday, we learned that, can you pull up the chart with the picture of the goat? Hey.
How you doing?
Good, Baruch Hashem. We're getting ready to start right now. It's
the one you sent me today.
Yeah, right there. Okay, this chart I worked really hard on, but it's unbelievably clear once you realize what I did.
Looks good.
Basically, this is the picture of a goat. It's the Sarah Pnimi of Yom Kippur. That's Mechaper and Tumas Mikdash V'Kedashav, only if the guy knew he was Tameh, forgot, and he didn't find out again. So this goat will kind of protect him until he finds out he brings a carbon oil of Yared. Now, we saw the Gemara starts danning. How do we know that the pasuk of a Chipur al HaKodesh, which is this week's parsha, Mitumas b'nei Yisrael u'mepish'eim l'chol chatoisam, is referring to the case of Tumas Mikdash v'Kedashav when he had a Yediyah Batchila? How do we know that this pasuk is referring to this very specific case of Tumas Mikdash v'Kedashav? First of all, how do we know it's referring to Tumas Mikdash v'Kedashav altogether? It doesn't say it in the pasuk. So, Gemara says maybe it's referring to Gimel Chamurus. Gimel Chamurus are referred to as Tuma, Avodah Zarah, Gilei Arayos, Shvichas Damim. So, we saw yesterday, we started danning the word mitumos, right? There's a mem, mitum ois b'nei Yisrael. Sounds like it's something which is a unique tumah. It's not any tumah. Daf Zayin Amud Beis, the bottom. And then the Gemara darshaned every word in that pasuk to come to the conclusion, right? And we'll go through it again today, that the Sarah Pnimi of Yom Kippur is mechaper only in a specific case of Tumas Mikdash v'Kedashav, which is Yediyah B'tchila. That's the only case. The Aveira that it targets is Tumas Mikdash v'Kedashav, where a guy knew he was Tameh, forgot, and then he walked into the Beis HaMikdash, or he ate hektish, and he didn't remember again. And the pasuk is ambiguous. It doesn't say it. How do we know from these words, V'chipur al HaKodesh? I love this Gemara so much. I'll tell you why. Because you see how Chazal took a pasuk. It's in this week's parsha, and every word they turned upside down with every letter to try to figure out what Aveira is the Sarah Pnimi of Yom Kippur coming to be Mechaper on. And until they realized, they discovered that it's Taka, the Tumas Mikdash v'Kedashav of Yediyah B'tchila. Now, how do we know? So the first drasha we had was Mitumas. Omar Mar. Yeshli be'inyan zeh, it's 5 lines from the bottom of Zayin Amud Beis. Yeshli be'inyan zeh lavi gimel tumas. I can bring you 3 different Aveiros that are referred to as Tumah, and maybe plug it into this pasuk and say, this is what the Sarah Pnimi is mechaper on. Tumas Avodah Zarah, Tumas Gilei Arayos, Tumas Shvichas Damim. All Gimel Chamuras are referred to as Tumah. So maybe, Gemara wanted to say earlier, maybe that's the Aveira that the Sarah Pnimi is mechaper on. It's referred to as Tumah, the Gimel Chamuras. How do we know that that's the case, though? All right, Karban Chamur. I know, but Karban Chamur for Gimel Chamuras would make sense. So why don't we say that the Sarah Pnimi, which is a Karban Chamur, covers the Gimel Chamuras?
Because after all, he knew that he's Tameh. And he still got in. He forgot. But
he forgot.
He should have made.
Saying that's the worst Aveira, you're saying.
Yeah,
wow. Okay.
אבל אתמול למדנו שקורבן עולה ויורד, הוא היה אצלי because הוא לא ידע. הוא לא ידע שהוא טמא. אחרי שהוא טמא, אז הוא יכול להשתלט.
Right, so you want a taina that Yediyah B'tchila and then forgetting is worse than Avodah Zarah and Gilei Arayos and Shvichas Damim.
No.
So why don't we say that it's Gilei Arayos and Shvichas Damim, Avodah Zarah? So why not say that Tumah is... Okay, so the Gemara...
Because of the kares. Because of the...
No, so the Gemara Darshan, so the word mitumas, here, like show the slide that you made, the mitumas, B'nai Yisrael, take a look at the Gemara says. The Gemara says, and we saw it yesterday, V'chipar ala kodesh mitumas B'nai Yisrael. Me, the mem of mitumas, says the Gemara is referring to a very specific kind of tumah, a tumah that's different than any other tumah in the Torah. And we're going to talk about it today, why it's different. But it's learned from the mem of mitumas, a tumah shecholak boyakasuv, something that the Torah separated and treated differently than all other tumas, and we'll see why tumas mikdash v'kedashav is treated differently, in what respect. But either way, Omar Mar, let's start again. Yeshli be'iniz elav gimel tumas avodah zarah tumas gilayas tumas shechus damim. So the Gemara wanted to say earlier that maybe you should include these tumas, and that's what the Sorah Pnim is mechaperan. Says the Gemara, Haya avodah zarah echadami. What's b'chlal v'havamina to say that v'chipar ala kodesh mitumas? Go back to the slide that you made, the other one, which is the Gimel, yeah. What's the havamina to say that it's coming to include avodah zarah gilarayis and shvichas damim? The Sorah Nasa b'fnim is being mechaper on these three. What's the havamina? Gemara asks like this: Hay avodah zarah heichadami. Ibe mezid. If you'll tell me that he did avodah zarah b'mezid, bark tolahu. He doesn't bring a carbon for a mezid. It's chayiv misa. What's the havamina to say? I'll leave it on. What's the havamina to say? Oh, you're doing the Gemara. Sorry. What's the havamina to say that that kind of aveira is niskaper with a sorah pnimi? If it's b'mezid, he gets misa. And I b'shoigig, and if he did avodah zarah b'shoigig, still you can't be niskaper with the sorah nasa b'fnim. You know why? Because avodah zarah b'shoigig brings what? Brings a carbon chatos. It's not subject to a sorah nasa b'fnim. So what's b'chlal the havamina that we would have said the sorah pnimi is mechaper on avodah zarah? Which case of avodah zarah? B'mezid he gets misa, b'shoigig it brings a carbon. So the Gemara says no. I would have said b'mezid v'loy asrubei, b'shoigig v'loy siyadalei. Sometimes with the mezid you don't get misa if there's no asra, or b'shoigig, and you didn't find out, right? You still are not aware of what you did, that you did avodah zarah. So there, the sorah pnimi would be toila by avodah zarah. The b'shoigig was unaware. Oh, nice. So the Gemara says, Gili arayis nami heichedami. What about Gili arayis? We had a havamina. Now we're up to Daf Chesamad Aleph, top line. Gemara had a havamina that maybe the sorah pnimi. This week's parsha. I keep saying this week's parsha because I'm so excited that we're talking a whole sugya this week about the Sorah LaHashem, trying to figure out what it's mechaper on. It's amazing that we are able to learn this week's parsha with the daf.
Last week was about Saras too.
Correct.
Everything's lining up.
Correct. Everything is lining up. Nathan, you're right. Last week was Rabbi Akiva, right? I think last week for us was Tzaras because we are a few blot ahead in the shiur, but I think Tzaras was actually Tzaras might have been on Shabbos. Yeah. Dafei, I think Dafei was Dafei on Shabbos? Okay, I don't know. I don't know where the Daf is holding.
Was to us. Dafei
into Davot, Dafei with Beis.
Right.
So was Dafei on Shabbos?
Right, copy.
Okay, so either way, it's lining up with the parsha.
No, Daf Gimel was on Shabbos. Daf Beis was Friday.
Okay,
Right?
okay.
I think so.
All right, either way, the Gemara, so here we have this pasuk, we're trying to figure out, how do we know that it's not referring to Gili Arayis? The Gemara says, what's the havamina that this pasuk is referring to Gili Arayis? Gili Arayis nami echadami iba mezid barktolu. If a guy does Gili Arayis b'mezid, he's not subject to a kapara of sorah pnimi on Yom Kippur. He gets killed. I b'shoigig, and if he does a b'shoigig, bar karbani, he's mamish like a din kol v'chayv krisis. He brings a chatas b'shoigig. He's not subject to the sorah pnimi.
B'shoigig is gole.
By Gili Arayis. Now, 1 second.
No, Gili Arayis.
Yeah, 1 second. We'll get the Shvichas Dam in a moment. So the Gemara says, B'shoigig is about carbon. He's not subject to Sorah Pnimi. Says the Gemara, no, we can have it, B'mezid v'loy asru bey. If a guy does Gili Arayis b'mezid without asra, I guess what? Did b'mezid without asra, so he doesn't get Misa. So there, maybe we would say the Sorah Pnimi is mechaper if he wants to do tshuva. B'shoigig v'loy siyadalei. Or B'shoigig, and he didn't know that it was an erva. I'm not sure how. Okay, a case of b'shoigig v'lo siyadalei. He wasn't aware, and he never found out about it that he was. He was with an erva. What?
זה הרעיוס.
I understand, but what would be a case?
אין קישוי בלי דעת.
No, I understand.
What he didn't know.
No, he didn't know that this was an erva. That the woman he was with was usher to him.
Small rooms, there are no lights.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's a case.
Yaakov Avinu. Vehina Hileya. He didn't know.
Taisus brings that.
I know, but I'm saying there's a possibility of being. I'm just bringing a.
Taisus brings that case. If
It's possible.
There are
Taisus
no lights.
Yeah, Taisus brings a case up.
brings a kasha. If a guy wakes up in the morning, it's the wrong woman.
What if he's
Taisus brings a kasha. Maybe Ksubis. I forgot where it is.
Okay.
He brings
Yeah, he brings the wrong woman. Yeah.
It was a.
Yeah, I don't know. Probably today it's a lot less common, with what we have and lights and
Back then,
texting.
tents,
Back then, I'm assuming that maybe it was a little bit more common, and yeah, the possibility existed. So b'shoigig and velois yadalei, that would be the sorah panimi, because if he's yadalei, if he knows afterwards that he made a mistake, he's got to bring a carbon, so he's not again subject to sorah panimi. But if he didn't find out yet, then the sorah panimi will be toila, will protect him until he brings the proper carbon. So maybe that would be the case. Oh, and shvichas damim nami. Shvichas damim as well. What would be the case of shvichas damim? Heicha dami. Iba mezid baktolu. He killed somebody. What are you going to give him a sorah panimi of Yom Kippur to be mechaper if he killed somebody b'mezid? How you talking? Vadanat. Iba shoygig. And if it's b'shoygig, by golasu. Again, the sorah panimi is not shaykh to somebody who kills, whether it's b'mezid, it's b'misa. If it's b'shoygig, it's by golas. So the Gemara says, no, even there, you could have had havamina, maybe the sorah panimi is mechaper. You know why? Because b'mezid v'lei asru bey. He did a b'mezid without asru, so he can't give a misa. So there, the sorah panimi would be mechaper. And b'shoygig v'lei siyadalei and shoygig. Yeah, but he's not nerag al yedei bezdin, right? He doesn't get the. There's no asra. And b'shoygig v'lei siyadalei. So again, he doesn't go to galus. Inami, we just learned makas, right? We finished makas just a week ago. There are cases in the beginning of the second parak of Makkah that mention exceptions to the rule that you can have somebody who kills bevli das and still he wouldn't go to Golus. In such a case, there would have been a havamina of the soil Hashem of Yom Kippur as mechaper for such a guy.
What was the case of this again?
Wait. What do you mean bevli das?
It goes up in the downward motion.
It goes up the down.
Karv la'inus, karv la'pshia, yeah, all these cases.
What is it? What do you mean bevli
Go in
das?
an upward motion. You don't go to.
Wait. What do you mean bevli das?
Bevli das means he was not aware, didn't do it intentionally.
Right, in the upward motion.
Didn't do it intentionally. There are cases where somebody kills somebody without intention. And I had a friend just now, he's facing a lawsuit. He has a huge warehouse. And he had a worker. And the worker was, I guess, working a lift, a silo, what do you call it? A forklift. And he backed up, he was on the second story. He backed up into the railing. And the whole forklift toppled over and killed him on the spot. And so, now,
Killed somebody else or killed the driver?
No, it killed the driver.
I had a bus driver who backed up and killed a passenger.
Huh?
A bus driver patient.
Yeah.
Bus is a very big thing. Someone went behind the bus.
Yeah.
And he accidentally just ran him over. So the guy is suffering psychologically. Legally he's not, but he was mentally, he's all messed up.
Wow. It's a trauma. Yeah. Traumatic.
You can imagine a large bus.
Yeah.
You can't always.
Yeah. I know somebody in Lakewood who killed somebody b'shaygig. Driving at night, and somebody was crossing, didn't wear reflectors, and regardless of whose fault it was. And whole Maisa, yeah, it's very traumatic. There's a Maisa with Rav Chaim Kanievsky. They came to Rav Chaim, and he said Amaleki. And then it was Nisbarer. Afterward, they checked. Somebody had bought the house because it went up for sale. The guy got killed, and they found in the basement that he was actually a Nazi. Yeah, he was a Nazi during the war. And so not only doesn't he go to Golus, he gets a mitzvah from Mechias Amalek. I'm just kidding. I don't know.
Where are these going? It's happening here in America? What is it?
They're gonna take it off YouTube. They're gonna totally block us. No.
What happens to make it shorter?
Even better.
What do you say?
What What happened to the forklift guy?
Exactly. Yeah, go viral.
He's facing, look, it wasn't his fault. It wasn't it was obviously he was one of his employees. Yep. We'll keep you posted.
Can't discuss active legal matters.
Yeah. But either way, it's a very interesting kasha. Once we're talking about this, the Chasam Sofer in the Tshuva writes that a person becomes a bar einshin from 13 years old. There's a whole shaila if it's from 20 years old or 13 years old. And the Chasam Sofer in the Tshuva writes that it's not true that you're only held responsible and accountable from when you're 20. It's really when you're 13. And he brings a raya from this Gemara. How do we see in this Gemara? Because he says, if it's true that you're accountable only from when you're 20, so the Gemara would have had another case of how a Sora Pnimi could be mechaper for the Gimel Chamuris. Lamashal, a guy is already 13 years old, right? He's already a gadol, and he commits Gili Arayas, Shlichas Domim, or Avodah Zarah. You can't have him bring a carbon because if you say he doesn't become a bar einshin until 20, he's not a bar carbon. So here he's stuck. He can't bring a carbon, right? Because he did it before 20, did the avera before he's 20, and yet he's a bar einshin because the Ramah and Shin Mem Gimel and Hilchos Shabbos says Ramakas Aviv brings this lahalacha. Somebody who hits his father when he's a cotton needs a kapara, even though he did it when he's not a bar einshin, but he still needs to do tshuva. So let the Gemara give a case. If it's true, genius of the Chasam Sofer, if it's true that you're not a bar einshin until you're 20, the Gemara could have another case of a 13-year-old who's a gadol committed the Gimel Chamuris. He's not a bar carbon because he's not a bar einshin until 20, but he still needs a kapara. So for that, the Sorah Pnimi is mechaper.
Send him to Jewy. Wow.
So Chasam Sofer says, you see from this Gemara that it's not true that you are a bar einshin as soon as you turn 13 years old. 13 years old.
Maybe the Chalukah.
By the way, how do we know that you're a bar einshin as soon as you're 13 years old? Anybody know the source of Ben Yud Gimel LeMitzvahs? How do we know that Ben Yud Gimel LeMitzvahs you're a bar einshin?
Ben Soreh Umore.
Do we know?
Ben Soreh Umore. Ben Soreh Umore.
It's called an Adam. It's chayav. Everything he does.
So he's called an Adam as soon as he gets das when he's 13. Beautiful. You're saying Ben Soreh Umore has to be.
13 one day. Ben Soreh Umore.
Wow. Interesting. I don't know why, but the Bartanura in Avos in Perikei says Ben Shloisha Ser LeMitzvahs. You wouldn't believe this. He says Dichsiv, and Taisus Yom Tov here has a whole arichas on his makar, but his source is it says like Karbona says as Ish or Isha ki yasim b'kol chatas ha'adam. It says an Ish who does an avera should bring a carbon, and the Bartanura says we find by Shechem vayikchu shnei bnei Yaakov Shimon v'Levi achei Dina Ish charboy. V'Levi, when he killed Shechem, was Shloisha Esrei Shana. He has a whole cheshbon that Levi was 13. The Torah calls Levi an Ish. And so you see that when the Torah says Ish, by Karbonis, says the Bartanura, that who's called an Ish? A 13-year-old. Levi's already called an Ish. Yeah, Levi's standing up for his sister Dina, and he's an Ish. And still, he's held accountable. What's really interesting about this Maramakim is, a while back, I was reading a book. It's called The Altruistic Personality by a doctor, a Holocaust survivor. You shouldn't see he's a Holocaust survivor. Actually, he was saved by non-Jews during the war. His name is Dr. Samuel Oliner. And he became a therapist, and he dedicated his life doing research, trying to understand why some non-Jews risk their own lives to save Jews. And he interviewed over 700 of these Chasidei Umas Ha'olam during the war that risked their lives. And he found the common denominator between all of these people, that what value did their parents instill in them that led them to risk their lives years later to save a Jew? They all said that when we were younger, when we made a mistake, our parents never shamed us. They tried to help us correct course without shaming us. Have us take responsibility without shaming us. And that's what gave us the courage, right, to always do what's right. Because they always trained us to do what's right without shame. They didn't shame us. They didn't put us down. Very interesting discovery. Sam Oliner, the altruistic personality. And I realized the Bartanura says, these two psukim that teach that Ben Shloisha says, Mechuyev mitzvahs, one is ish by carbon, taking responsibility, correcting path, and the other ish is by standing up, risking your life for what's right, by achedina, Levi, achedina. You see this connection by Ben Shlosh the mitzvah, which is really interesting to me. But either way, Chasam Sofer brings a raya from our Gemara that you are not a bar einchin, you're a bar einchin already by 13 years old. Okay, says the Gemara, weiter. Omar Mar, Yochel Ashol Shtumas Alol Yesar Mechaper. Talmud Loimar Mitumois Veloy Kol Tumois. Maybe I would have thought that the Soira Panimi is Mechaper on those three tumas, on the Gimel Chamuras. So how do I know not? Talmud Loimar Metumas, like Rocky's beautiful chart has over here, the Mem, Mitumois B'nai Yisrael, the Mem sounds like it's only on some tumas, but not on all tumas, not on the Gimel Chamuras. So why is this different? Just like we find that Tumas Mikdash v'Kedoshav, it's a separate category. Afkan, so too, but the Sorah Pnimi, it's only mechaper on Tumas Mikdash v'Kedoshav. That's a separate category. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara says, "My chalak." Where do you find that Tumas Mikdash v'Kedoshav is unique? That is learned from Mitumos. That's learned from the Mitumos. How do you see that Tumas Mikdash v'Kedoshav is unique, more unique than any other Tumah? Says the Gemara, you know how? The Maisi ba'oila v'yored. It's unique in the sense that it brings a carbon oila v'yored. Yeah? Usually other Tumas, right, Ovid avodah zarah b'shoigig, or Gilei Arayis b'shoigig, those things, they bring a chatas, right, a fixed carbon. What's the Aveira? What's the Tumah that b'shoigig you bring something unique that is not relevant, is not shaykh to other Tumas? That is the shoigig of Tumas Mikdash v'Kedoshav. So therefore, that's what's learned from me Tumas, because that's the unique one. Says the Gemara, Divrei Rabbi Yehuda, my cholak, Eim avodah zarah, asks the Gemara, what do you mean avodah zarah is also unique? My cholak, the ma'aseh seira v'lo kisva, because you bring a seira and you don't bring a kisva, right? You don't bring a sheep, you bring a goat. So the Gemara says, Amar of Kahana, nah, anan chilek lahakol kamrinan. We're talking about when the Torah separated this tumah from other tumas, lahakol, yeah. V'hai chilek lahachmeru. Oila v'yored is a uniqueness, is special lakula, because we're allowing an ani to bring a cheaper carbon. So that kind of difference, that kind of chilek, that's what could be included in Sarah Panimi of Metumas. But this is lahachmer. You're making him bring a more expensive carbon. I'm assuming that limiting and narrowing it down to a seira, not a kispa, limiting and saying only a seira, not a kispa, is being machmer, because usually chayv krisis b'shoigig can bring either a kispa or a seira. Yeah. True. The Sarah Pnimi you're talking about?
Yeah.
Correct. So anybody in Klal Yisrael did avodah zarah and didn't know about it. So the Sarah Pnimi, I would have said, L'Klal Yisrael, because you can't bring a private car because you don't know v'lo yisyadele. The Gemara would say in the case of v'lo yisyadele. Yeah, so Klal Yisrael. Yeah. So the Gemara says emo yoledes. Maybe say that the Tumah is talking about yoledes. The Sarah Pnimi is mechaper on the Tumas yoledes. And what's unique about a yoledes? And what's the case of the chilek? The Maisa Oila V'Yar, the Yoledes is subject to bring an Oila V'Yar, so you see that that's also unique in that sense. No, it says L'chol Chatoisam, V'lo L'chol Tamoisam. There has to be some Aveira involved, not Stam Tumah. And the Yoledes didn't do any Aveira. The Yoledes didn't do an Aveira, so it can't fit into that pasuk. The Yoledes didn't do an Aveira. Well, Reb Shimon ben Yochai, it feels so good to say, Reb Shimon ben Yochai, we're almost there. What was last night? We didn't have Ma'ariv yet. What was last night? 24. Okay, wow.
Isn't it
Okay. Ol Reb Shimon ben Yochai de Omar. You let this nami choy to see that every woman who gives birth does an aveira because she is karas b'shas shekaras leledes. She is nishbas. She'll never be with her husband. Never have children again. So she doesn't have to feel the pain of childbirth again, right?
What is it?
So Reb Shimon Yochai says that really the carbon that the woman brings is not just stam carbon oil of it's a carbon chatos. She did an aveira. What's the aveira she brought? What's the aveira she did? She made a Shevuos. She was kafza Lishova, a shvua that she can't keep. She's going to be with her husband again. It's just in the moment of pain, right? Especially.
She brings.
Listen, there are women who swear out of pain that they'll never be not dafka by childbirth, but it's like stop. They get upset, it's like emotional. They get emotional.
But she brings כמו מצורע. שני תורים או בשני
well, let's see. The Gemara says, Reb Shimon Tamei the Amr Mekayim Mochra. We'll see in a moment. So Reb Shimon says, you're right. You can't see it from the drasha of mitum oisam because that might be referring to Yeleda. So how do you know it's the Masmikdash v'Kadashav? I know it because the pasuk says v'chiper al hakodesh. Reb Shimon had a different source for it. Yesterday we learned about it. V'chiper al hakodesh means it's mechaper on a chait that's connected to kodesh. So that's how he knows it. That it's referring to the Masmikdash. What is the aim of Mitzayra? What about maybe it's a Mitzayra like Reb Shol just said? That's also unique. And what's unique about a Mitzayra? Because a Mitzayra does bring a carbon oil of a Yoreh, just like a guy who Tumas Mikdash v'Kedashav. So maybe the Mitum Oisam, the Tumah that is unique in the sense that the Torah was makel in that Tumah, maybe it's referring to a Mitzayra because an Oni doesn't have to bring a Chatas like an Usher. Omar Ramoshia lechol chatoisam v'lo l'chol tamoisam. He did it. He wasn't chayta. A Mitzayra wasn't chayta. What do you mean? Omar, we know. Al shiva dvarim the goyim banal, right? And shiva dvarim. What are the 7 things that nega comes? The Gemara in Erichin enumerates them: lashon hara, shvichas damim, Shevuos shav, givei arayas, gasas ruach, gezla, and tzaras ayin. So those 7 averis, Michael and Meimer, Salvada. His carbon oil of Yed is not just a carbon because he was tamei. He became tamei. It's a carbon on a chait, so it could still fit into the pasuk of l'chol chatoisam. So maybe when the sorah pnimi is brought, it's brought to be mechaper on a mitzayra. How do you know it's tumas mikdash v'kadashav? Says the Gemara, no. Hasam nigei de ikaperle. It's unbelievable. The nega is mechaper, not the carbon. The carbon is shtaruye bekachem, and the carbon is only coming to complete the process of tahara. But it's not mechaper. It's not a carbon chatos. It's not mechaper, and therefore that can't be the sorah panini, because by sorah panini it says l'chol chatoisam. It's a carbon that's mechaper. But by mitzayra it's not mechaper. The nega is mechaper, and the carbon is only to be materim and kachem.
How it's similar to a swear of a pregnant woman? I mean, a woman that delivers. Because they bring the same, but they bring the same korban.
They bring a carbon oil of Yared, true.
And also they bring 2.
But you can't
They bring shne torim or shne bnei ona.
Right, yeah, okay. Who's mechaper? In which case?
Let's say the yoledet.
The Yoledes doesn't need a kapara according to most Tanoim. It's only a sheet of Reb Shimon Bar Yochai. So the Gemara says, certainly you can't learn from l'chol chatoisam mitumas bnei. It does no chet over there, so it can't. That's not what the pasuk is referring to, because the Yoledes doesn't bring a chatas, a carbon oil of Yered for a chatas. She didn't do an avera. She gave birth. She's tummy. She has to be matar herself. So that can't be what the Torah is referring to in the Sarah Panimi, because over there it says l'chol chatoisam. It's only according to Reb Shimon Bar Yochai that says she did a chet, but Reb Shimon Bar Yochai has a different source. How you know Timus Mikdash v'Kedashav altogether, so it's not shver according to him. That's the Gemara earlier.
I saw it in the Zohar.
Huh?
I saw it in the Zohar.
What did you see in the Zohar?
So the Zohar that she כמו שהמצורע חוטא בדיבורו, הכוח של הדיבור זה מהריאות from the lungs, because the air come from the lungs, ושם זה 2 ספירות של נצח והוד, גם היא חטאה בדיבורה, she's also חוטא בדיבור שלה, גם כן, שהיא אמרה שהיא לא, זה גם כן של האוויר, נצח והוד, כך אומר הזוהר, אז זה כוח הדיבור.
Episode you're saying.
אז כוח הדיבור, אז גם כן מביא למה שני יונה? ששני היונות הן מצפצפות, מדברות, כי זה דיבור.
Wow, very interesting. So you're saying Alpisoid, she is a chetas. Alpisoid. Okay, but you also, we said already, we established, Rab Shol is Sfardi, and the Sfardim, they put the soid before the pshat. Soid, pshat, remez, drush. I'm not saying it in cynically. Yeah. We're doing pshat first, yeah.
The pain of labor is based on the chet of Chama. 10 nisyonos that we get because of the chet of Chama, and one of them is the pain of labor.
Wow, yeah, that's the Ki be'etzav teil libonim, the Torah says, Hashem, that's one of our ancient.
This is a reflection exception of the original Chet HaKadmoini that Chava...
So that's also a Chet. Okay, that's also unbelievable. Ooh, Groise Teures, being this gal over here tonight. It's beautiful. Okay, so the Gemara says, by the way, I never understood that Mida connected Mida. Chava made Adam Marishan eat from the Eitz Hadas, so the Einish was Be'etzev Teil Libonim, Shaykhis. So what's the connection? Okay, not for now, but I'm just saying. Okay, Agav, once you're mentioning it. Ve'ema Nazir Tameh. Gemara asks, maybe say it's a Nazir Tameh. Oh, and a Nazir Tameh is also unique. Maybe the Surah Pnimi, the Surah Hashem is Mechaper for a Nazir Tameh. A Nazir that was Matam himself. He has to bring a carbon Tahara.
The Chava was with the Yitzhahara.
You go back to the kasha that I just asked? Yeah.
Chava was with the Yitzhahara.
The Nachash had wow. Okay, there's what to be said over there. Okay, verstehe. Beautiful. Yeah.
Not for this year.
Right. The Shevuos that she's never going to be with her husband again. It all ties in. All comes. It's all of Torah. Unbelievable. What did he say? All of Torah can be sandwiched into Parshas Bereshis. All of Bereshis can be sandwiched into the first pasuk, the first word, the first letter. All one. It's Kula Choda Mikshi. That's where the menorah that presents Torah had to be made out of one piece. It's all ein zach. It's all one piece. Okay. Maybe it's a Nazir Tameh that the Surah Hashem is mechaper for. The Chilik the Ma'aseh Torah of Bnei Yoina because it brings a special carbon. No, l'chol chatoisam, l'chol tamoisam. The Nazir that's Matameh doesn't bring a carbon to be mechaper on his chet. That's only a carbon tahara, and the Surah Pnimi is for chet, so that can't be what it's mechaper for. But 1 second, there's the Belazar Akaper who says he is a chayta, so maybe the Surah Pnimi is coming to mechaper for a Nazir Tameh. So according to Belazar Akaper, he'll know Tumas Migdash V'Kedoshav from a different source in the pasuk V'Chipar Al HaKodesh, like we said yesterday. So he has a different source for it. Okay, Zuk da Heilige Gemura. Omar Mar, Reb Shimon Omer, Mimekaymayu Muchra. Sharayu Omer V'Chipar Al HaKodesh Metumos Shel Kodesh. Lamaisa Reb Shimon learns it straightforward. How do I know that the Surah Pnimi is mechaper on Tumas Migdash V'Kedoshav? Read the words Reb Shimon Bar Yochai says. It says V'chiper al HaKodesh Metumos. Read the words. It's Kodesh Tumas that pertains to Kodesh. That's all I need. Ask the Gemara, Shapir Ka'amar Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon has a very pashut pshat. And how I know that the Surah Hashem is mechaper for Tumas Migdash. It says in the pasuk, V'chiper la Kodesh mitumas, Tumah that pertains to Kodesh. So why does Rabbi Yehuda have to go and darshan mitumas, a unique kind of Tumah? What is that? It's Tumas Migdash because it brings the carbon oil of the yard. We had all these kashas right now. We just say like Reb Shimon. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda Amalach, Ahu miboy lekeicha de Ovid lefnei v'lefnem. Hachanavad behechal. Now he needs the words V'chiper al HaKodesh to teach us that just like you do the avoida with the dama par and the dama sor, achas lamala, v'sheva lamata, inside the kodesh hakadoshim, ben badei ha'aron, there's a process, there's a seder in how to do the avoida inside. So v'chiper al hakodesh means that also when you come into the kodesh, which is the heichal, not the kodesh hakadoshim, you should use the same process of achas lamala, v'sheva lamata, so that you should be mechaper on the Tumas Migdash V'Kedoshav. So either way, he uses those words for a different drasha. Asks the Gemara, wow, it's an important halacha. Reb Shimon, so how's Reb Shimon going to know that? Gemara says, Ahu, mivechein yasel la'oyel mayed nafka. It already says in the end of the pasuk, v'chein yasel la'oyel, whatever you did in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, do in the Kodesh, in the oil mayed, it's mafurish. So Gemara says, it's mafurish Rabbi Yehuda, so why does Rabbi Yehuda need v'chiper ala Kodesh for that? Gemara, ima yav aminu naisa par v'sor achrin v'navid. Rita says, yeah, very nice. It says, V'chein yasel oil mayed, but I wouldn't know that you should do it with the blood, the same blood of the dama par and the dama sor that you used in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. How do I know it's the same blood that you have to use? Kamash Malan, that V'chiper al HaKodesh, you need that it should be with the zelba blit, the same par v'sor that you sprinkled, ben badei aron and the pareichas and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, you should also do in the heichal by the Mizbeach Hazov. Reb Shimon, how's Reb Shimon going to know the taki need with the same blood of the par and the sor that was sprinkled on the badei aron? It says v'chein yasel oil mayed b'nei mashmano. It's all included in the v'chein yasel oil mayed. It says v'chein yasel oil mayed. Like, why would you think that you could use a different par v'sor? It means exactly the way you did it in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. That's how you do it in the heichal. So that is as far as the conversation of Machlekes Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda is concerned, how I know what's the Chipra LaKodesh used for. What drasha is that used for? Omar Mar. Okay, weiter. Yochol al kol tumois shabakodesh yehisor zeh mechaper. I just want to stop over here for a moment. I'm learning this Gemara. All these Gemaras this week again. The week of Achrei Mos, of the parsha of the Sorah Pnimi that we bring on Yom Kippur. The Kohen Gadol brings on Yom Kippur. And I always grew up believing, like the Avodas Kohen Gadol, like during the Musaf of Yom Kippur, is like the most emotional, important part of davening. It never dawned on me that all it's mechaper for is a very specific case of Tumas Migdash V'Kedashav. I'm thinking, wow, this is incredible. Yeah, now we're going to get our kapara. And we're singing and we're crying and the Kohen Gadol, Mishalei Ra Kohen Gadol, Yotzim Beis Kodesh HaKadosh, Mare Kohen, his face was aglow. He went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. 1 second, slow down. Do you know what he went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim for? He went in simply to be mechaper on a very specific scenario, case of Tumas Migdash V'Kedashav. A guy who had a yediyah that he's tamei, then he forgot, and he never remembered again. So this Soyer Pnimi is mechaper, not even mechaper kapara gemura. It's toilet protects you until you remember to bring a carbon oil of a yared. That's it? That's all? I'm so deflated and disappointed. I cannot believe it. Until I was in the Koilo today and I was talking to Rabbi Slamet, I talked to different people. I was like, how can it be? It bothers me. It's Kodesh HaKadosh mechaper on all the Averis. Really, the Surah Lazos is mechaper on the Shar Averis. We saw in the Mishnah of days. So they pointed me to Maharil. The Maharil asks it a little different. The Maharil says, when we daven on Yom Kippur, what do we spend most of our time in the davening of Musaf? We spend on the process and the avoid of the Surah Lashem. Right? The Surah Lashem, that's what occupies most of the Musaf. Says, so Maharil is bothered. What do you mean? The Surah Azazel was mechaper and Shar Averis. The Surah Azazel is like an afterthought. Surah Mishtalech, yeah, okay, whatever. And the Surah Lashem is the whole focus. So Hitaka asks in those words, in the Tfilas Musaf of Yom Kippur, why is that the focus? And he says, a bigger side, he says that no, the Surah Azazel was not mechaper unless the Surah Pnimi was brought by the Kohen Gadol. The Surah Azazel to be mechaper and Shar Averis needed the Surah Hashem. The Surah Hashem was the foundation, was the cornerstone, was what allowed for the kapara on Shar Averis through the Surah Azazel. But the Surah Azazel needs the Surah Hashem. So Avad, it all starts with the Surah Hashem. What does that mean? It all starts with Tumas Migdash V'Kedashav. So Islam would said to me that the Chassidish Sfarim say, Tumas Migdash V'Kedashav, we think is nothing. And the doctor was just mentioning B'Shem Rabbi Sauer before the shiur. We're talking a little bit about it. He says Tumas Migdash V'Kedashav is really the cause to all the other Averis. What's Tumas Migdash V'Kedashav? Tumas Migdash V'Kedashav is you're not honoring, you're not holding Kedusha high enough. You're forgetting about Kodesh. You're forgetting about Kedusha. Tumah is, so you're walking in or you're absorbing in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, your mind, your body. You're absorbing Tumah. You're opening at the Tumah. So that's the Pesach. La Pesach Hatas Revitz. That's where it all starts. So Mamela, when we want the Surah Azazel to be kapara, it starts with the Surah Hashem. You need the Surah Hashem to be mechaper on the fact that you allowed all the shmutz and the tumah to enter into the Beis HaMikdash, into whatever the Beis HaMikdash represents in our lives. So Mamela, and B'mirat Shemayim. So comes the Rishner. It's Achrei Mos Kedoshim. Achrei Mos Kedoshim is a beautiful Rishner, which I absolutely love. The Heilige Rishner says, it says Kedoshim Tiyu. So Rashi says, the Mefarshim say, Chazal, Yochel Kamoini, you think you could be as holy as Hashem? Says the Gemara, says Chazal, no. Yochel Kamoini, Talmud Loimar, Ki Kodesh Ani. Hashem says, I'm separate. You cannot be as holy as me. All right? Kedoshim Tiyu. Yochel Kamoini, you think it's like me? Talmud Loimar, Ki Kodesh Ani. Says the Heilige Rishner, a beautiful idea. He says, no, you're reading it wrong. Kedoshim Tiyu, be holy. Yochel Kamoini, you could be as holy as me, Hashem says. A Yid can be as holy as Hashem. You know how? Tilmoid loymar, learn to say, Ki kodesh ani, that I'm holy. You have to walk around saying that I am holy, so I can't absorb the tumas, mikdash v'kadashav, because that's the source for all the averas. So you want to know why there's such a great emphasis on Kippur, on tumas, mikdash v'kadashav, that the Sorah Hashem is mechaper on that. You want to know why most of Tfilas Musaf is focused on that? Because that is the La Pesach Hatas Roivetz, so we have to reinforce Kedusha. That's the master key. Tumas Mikdash v'kadashav, and that's where Pshol is mechazik, filters, kosher phones. This is Imamish. We were having this conversation the other day. That's where it's at. Okay. So Lamaisa, not to get too sidetracked. Huh?
People go to Har Bayis now.
Yeah. You're right. That's Yonim.
Can you pull up that Maril? The Maril comes in the second teretz. He has another teretz. I wasn't going to mention it. You got to see this inside. Take a look. V'oy teretz. Take a look. V'oy teretz. The Kedushas HaMikdash loy nizbat le'adayin, mamish Nathan. Dichsiv v'hinasu pischei oilam. Ritzoynu loyma shekedushasen le'oilam. The Kedusha, lefikach nikra beis oilamim. It's forever. So mamela nimtza hanichnes adayin betuma. Oh, Nathan, mamish. Upnei Chayiv Koros. Okay, we're not going to get into politics here. But he's a Rishon.
All these people are b'shogeg now.
By the way, the Ramah, if you open the Shulchan Aruch, the Ramah, a majority of his psukim is based on the Maril. He brings the quotes to the Maril left and right. So the Maril is a cornerstone in halacha. So this is the Maril.
Wait, Rabbi.
Let's take a look. Pliya Beinov. Why Marichim? His lashon is unbelievable. What's the Sorah Pnimi so important for?
I went with a friend who I regard as very learned, and we went to the mikvah, and then he took me up to the Har Bayit, and we were with a group of guys, and this was like maybe 3 years ago, and people were still wearing masks. And then we set a chazar shots on the Har Bayit. And it was.
You were on the Har Bayis?
Yeah, and they took people.
Hey, show the camera. Let's show the camera.
Hey, give me the extra para. Remember, told me.
And Ben Shapiro just went also, no?
All right, no, God, we're not getting involved in the politics of it.
This is the case, but they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know, and then they don't even know that.
100%.
So what are they allowed to be naked? How are they naked?
If they really knew, they wouldn't do it.
How
are they able to be naked?
I can't talk for them. I'm just here. Daf Yomi, Maril. We're not beyond that. We got to get
You know what they tell me?
Yeah. Weiter.
We have our rabbis and you have your rabbis.
Okay, weiter. Chevra, weiter. Let's pick this up after Meir. Omar Mar.
I have my rabbi. Okay.
We have 5 minutes. Omar Mar. Yochel al kol tumois shebakoidesh yeisor zeh mechaper. Maybe all tumas shebakoidesh. In other words, whether you had a yediyah basoif, yediyah batchila, all of the types of tumas. Talmud loimer mipish eyam lechol chatoisam. We're makish chatoim lepshoim. My niu. What's similar to a pesha? A mezid cannot bring a carbon yachid. So the chet that the Sorah Pnimi is mechaper for has to be similar to a mezid in the sense that you cannot bring your own carbon. What would that be? A yediyah b'tchila, but no yediyah b'soif, because you can't bring your own carbon, because you don't remember, right? If you don't remember, you can't bring a carbon. So that's how we know that it's only by yediyah b'tchila, v'ein yediyah b'soif, because it has to be similar to a pesha, to a mezid. My niya, which one is that? Yesh b'yediyah b'tchila, v'yesh b'yediyah b'soif, high bar carbon. It can't be yediyah b'tchila because that's about carbon. Let's read this yadilei. The Gemara says, what's the habmin to say that it might be yesh b'yediyah b'tchila, yesh b'yediyah b'soif? Gemara says, let's read this yadilei samach l'shkiya sachama. Salka dai techamina. Adamaisa nisla leikamash molan. Very interesting Gemara. The Gemara says, what would be bachlal v'havamina to say, right, that is yochel al kol tumois shebakodesh yesor zemechaper. What's the havamina bachlal that we need a drasha to be mamayit? The havamina of yesh b'dichel b'soif. It's about carbon. You have to bring a carbon. So if you have to bring a carbon, avadi you can't be in a skapar b'sar apnimi. What's the havamina over here? So the Gemara says the havamina would be there is a case of yesh b'yediyah b'tchila v'yesh b'yediyah b'soif that you cannot bring a carbon. You know when? If erev Yom Kippur you did the avera, right? Or you only remembered, let's just say erev Yom Kippur, and erev Yom Kippur you can't bring a carbon. You know why? Samach l'shki zacham, you can't bring a carbon. Why not? Why can't you bring a carbon on Yom Kippur? Samach l'shki next day Yom Kippur you only bring carbon as tzibur, you don't bring a carbon yachid. So therefore, even the Mefarshim ask, even in the morning, even if you remembered in the morning, erev Yom Kippur, you don't say mizmor l'soida, right? Why don't you say mizmor l'soida? Because you can't eat a toida, it can't be nechal on Yom Kippur b'chlal, so you can't bring a toida. So it's not just samach l'shkiyas achama. Really, even in the morning, if you remembered, we're not going to allow you to bring a carbon that cannot be eaten in the allotted time slot for that carbon. So either way, the Gemara finds a heichatimtza that technically you could have the Sorah Pnimi Mechaper on a case of Yediyah B'tchila v'Yediyah B'soif, in a case where it's Erev Yom Kippur, you only remember then and you can't bring a carbon. So maybe Yom Kippur, the Sorah Pnimi should be Mechaper for that. So therefore you need a miyat that it's not, because it's not doime to a pesha. Omer Mar, Menayin sheyesh b'Yediyah B'tchila v'ein b'Yediyah B'soif shesoyer zet toila. How do you know that it's toila? Says the Gemara, oh gosh. Okay, let's see if we could just finish till the two dots quickly. So Gemara says, how do you know it's only toila? Menayin, what's about Ma'ike Kashile? Menayin, how do you know it? We just told you. Ma'ike Kashile. We just learned it from Chatoim that has to be Dumit Pshoim. That it's not a Baskarbin. Ochel Kashile. Hashtu the Omret Chatoim Dumit Pshoim. Mapsham de labne carbon. Av Chatoim Namid labne carbon. Ema Mapsham de labne carbon la'olam. Av Chatoim de labne carbon la'olam. And my ninu ein b'yedi b'tchila v'yesh b'yedi b'soif. Right? What kind of chet, variation of Tumas Migdash, is similar to a mazid? A mazid can never bring a carbon. But a Yediyah B'tchila by Tumas Migdash could eventually bring a carbon when he remembers. So it must be something that didn't be Yediyah B'tchila, only Yediyah B'soif, which can never bring a carbon. Says the Gemara, so why don't we say it's that? Maybe that's not what it works for. Maybe you'll tell me wherever you have the musaf of Yom Kippur Manasa B'chutz for that kind of aveira. Ask the Gemara, maybe turn it around. Maybe say the Sorah Chitzon is for Yediyah B'tchila without a Yediyah B'soif, and the Sorah Pnimi is for Yediyah B'soif without a Yediyah B'tchila. So Gemara says, I learned from L'chol Chatoisam that it has to be something that is Roy Lovay L'Dechi of Chatos. If it's only Yediyah B'soif, it can never be Roy Lovay L'Dechi of Chatos. So there has to be something that's Yediyah B'tchila, because that is Roy Lovay L'Dechi of Chatos. When the Skaper Kapara Gemura asks the Gemara, let him have a Kapara Gemura, says the Gemara, Iksev Mechatoisam Kedeka Amrit. If it would have said Mechatoisam, you're right. Hashta D'chsev L'chol Chatoisam, I darshan lahanich de osel l'chlal chatos, that he's still chayv chatos when he remembers. The Sorah Pnimi is only toila, but he's still chayv chatos when he remembers. Ask the Gemara, if it's takanat mechaper, what does it mean toila? Rabbi Zeir loymar in mace before he remembers mace b'loyava, and already the Sorah Pnimi is mechaper for that at that point. Amalei Rava for that in mace misa marekas, the misa itself is mechaper. I don't need the Sorah Pnimi once he dies. Elamarava lahagen olav Mina Yisurin, to protect him from Yisurin. Okay, so end over here. If I could just end with one thing, or should we just like one line? Yeah. It says in the Torah, this week's parsha, Bezois Yovei Aaron Al HaKodesh. So the Meshech Chachma, somebody showed me an amazing Meshech Chachma. Meshech Chachma says, he quotes from the Vilna Gaon, what is Bezois Yovei Aaron Al HaKodesh? He says that Aaron was able to go into the Kodesh HaKadoshim all year round, not only on Yom Kippur. Bezois, with the Seder of the Sorah Pnimi, with this Avodah, was able to go in all year round. But his children, and forever and ever afterwards, you weren't able to go in all year round. So, Meshech Chachma says, what's Pshat? Only Aaron HaKohen, as long as he did the Seder Avodah of Yom Kippur, can go in all year round into the Kodesh HaKadoshim? What's epis? Menayin l'chazois. Says the Meshech Chachma, an amazing idea. He says, because we know that in the Midbar, they weren't allowed to shecht outside of the Mishkan, to eat meat. The only meat they could eat was meat from karbonis. Says the Meshech Chachma, so it turns out that at which point in our history did we have the most karbonis shechted? In the Midbar. Because if somebody wanted a good piece of steak, he couldn't shecht it in his oil. He had to go to the Mishkan and shecht it b'teiras carbon. So, at which point in history was the Aveira of Tumas Migdash v'Kadoshav probably most common? At a point when there were the most karbonis, which is during the 40 years of the Midbar. So Hashem knew that at that point, we have to allow that kapar of the Sorah Pnimi to repeat itself a couple of times a year whenever Aaron comes in with the Sorah Pnimi, because the chet is so prevalent, because there were so many karbonis that he couldn't shecht outside of the Mishkan. So in Mela, we had to allow Aaron to come in any time during the year, bezois, as long as he does the Seder Avodah. So Kum Techois, I just want to end with this gematria from Rabbi Chaim Sonnenfeld. He says, unbelievable. He says, Kum Techois, that whenever the chatoim are more prevalent, you need a tshuva that's more accessible, right? That's really what the Meshech Chachma is saying. You need Aaron to be able to go in at any time to do the avodah the Sarah Panimi and the Kodesh HaKadoshim, because the chet was more prevalent. How so? Because you had so many karbanos, that's all you could eat. So kumta is that nowadays, there's a gematria. Why is Torah so accessible all over the world today? Through social media, through camera, you have people listening in Eretz Yisrael, in England. What's the pshat? Teretz is, Shaya Novi says, Tzion b'mishpat yipodeh v'shaveh b'tzdaka. It says, Tzion b'mishpat yipodeh is b'gematria Talmud Yerushalmi, v'shaveh b'tzdaka is b'gematria Talmud Bavli. Chaim Sonnenfeld said, you want to know how Tzion, how we're going to be zoicha to the Geula today, is through Torah Sheba'al Peh. You could check it up, 1076 Talmud Yerushalmi, which is b'mishpat yipodeh v'shaveh b'tzdaka. The Brisker Rav heard this gematria, it said, Beruach HaKodesh Nemra. It was said with Ruach HaKodesh. Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld must have had Ruach HaKodesh to say this. So Mamela, if we want the Geula Shlema, we have to open a Gemara every single day, because the key is Talmud Bavli and Talmud Yerushalmi, so Hashem made it accessible. All over the world, you just have to open a Gemara, open a Torah anytime, or whatever you use to listen to a shiur, and you're Makar of the Geula Shlema b'meir v'yimenu. Okay, let's stop over here.